Hey guys, all right, so I'm still figuring this all out. Let me just see what I need to do. Manage. Is that this? Let's see. All right. So I hope you guys are here. I'm not even sure if you can say something, but and I'm just sorting this out. But I have some really kind of fun stuff I'm going to share with you. And I want to say hello to all of our new patrons. If you haven't gotten an email from me, you definitely will soon. Behind me is kind of the disaster of my office in Paranormal Tower. But we're going to do this up here because it's a little bit more, there's a little bit more room to do this. So essentially, I have a new artifact that I talked about the other night on our Facebook Live session. And the artifact actually arrived during this COVID-19 fiasco. And I get artifacts, I don't want to say I get them all the time, but I get them fairly frequently. This was an unusual one. And it came to me and I just stored it in, all right, it looks like you guys can talk too. Yay, talk back. So it came to me and I took it and I just stored it in a box in my garage at home. And I didn't really think anything about it. I was glad to have it, but I was more concerned with what was going on in the world than I was with this particular artifact. As you know, I'm sure everybody is. So, but I had this idea out of nowhere that I wanted to do a podcast. And I decided that I was going to do a podcast on a story that I've always found really, really fascinating. And the podcast was about the story of a murder that took place in Morristown, New Jersey. And it was a man who, his name was Antoine, the murderer's name was Anton LeBlanc. And it's a famous story if you're from New Jersey, but it's even obscure here. It was the last public execution in Morris County in 1812 or 1811, something like that. And my numbers might be off. My dates might be off. But it was a horrific crime. And essentially what it was, and I have a podcast on it, I encourage you to go listen to it. But essentially this guy was born in France, went to Germany, kind of thought a little bit about himself, kind of thought he was, who he was. Fell in love with his boss's daughter. And he thought, I'm an educated guy and I come from a good family in France. We should get married. And the boss's daughter was like, no, she's not marrying you. And so he decided he would come to America. And because he was just a smart guy and America was just the land of opportunity, he would come here, make a ton of money, go home and prove this guy wrong. But he really didn't have any skills and he really didn't know anyone here. So he came over thinking that he would just walk in and someone would pay him to be himself. I don't know how many of you guys have spent a lot of time in America, but that's not how it happens here. So you have to be prepared to come over and work hard. So he ended up getting hired by a guy named Captain Samuel Sayer or Judge Samuel Sayer. This guy was a farmer in Morristown. He had four adult children, two who still lived at home. But they were away the particular day. He hires this guy to be a farmhand. Okay. The guy thinks he's being hired to be an overseer. He thinks he's management material. So He ends up working there for 2 weeks, and it's not the job that he thinks it's going to be. So rather than quitting and moving on, he decides, I am going to rob these people blind, but I don't want to get caught. So in addition to robbing them blind, I'm going to kill everybody on the farm. So he kills the farmer and his wife, and he also kills their slave, Phoebe. Phoebe is often called an indentured servant. She's also called just a servant or a helper, but in truth, she was likely a slave. The reason we think that is because when he hired LeBlanc, he was hiring him to replace a runaway slave. So we know Sayer owned slaves. So in all likelihood, he also had, if she was of African descent, she was a slave. But anyway, LeBlanc kills them. The way he does it is he lures Sayer into the barn, kills him, throws him in a pile of horseshit, and then it lures out the wife, kills her, puts her in the pile of horseshit, sneaks into the house, goes upstairs, realizes if he starts ransacking the place, Phoebe's going to hear him, and he kills her in her bed. So this is a terrible story, right? But what happens afterwards is even worse. So no, maybe not worse, but so he gets hanged. Afterwards, he's not only sentenced to die, he is actually sentenced then to have his body given to 2 doctors to have experiments performed on it. Now, back then, that was the real deal, right? That was some scary shit. He got paid money, though. He got paid money to tell his story. So where that money went, we don't know, but it certainly didn't go to protecting his body from desecration afterwards. Because as soon as he was hanged, and his hanging was an atrocity, it took him 12 minutes to die. He was flung 8 feet in the air, and he ended up strangling to death instead. They lowered his body into a casket, and they took it off to Morristown Courthouse, where there are 2 doctors waiting for him. Now, they're not dissecting his body for like surgical purposes. They're actually doing experiments on batteries and electrical currents. So essentially, they're cutting little cuts in his skin to see if they can reanimate him. Real Mary Shelley crap, right? And after that's done, they write about it extensively. They're like, wow, that was really cool. We made his eyes blink, his arms jumped. At one point, he shook. After they do that, the body is then given to a tanner, where it is skinned, and little trinkets are made of his skin. Keepsakes, they're called. They're called goodly keepsakes. That's what somebody calls them. So wallets, lampshades, there's a couple of bookmarks. And these are actually still in existence. You can still see them from time to time in people's collections. I believe the New Jersey Museum on Genealogy has a wallet made of his skin. They also have a perfect death mask of his as well. So when we talk about things that, maybe leave a mark, maybe that's one of those things, right? For some reason, I've known that story, for the past 25 years. So I decided I'm going to tell that story. So I write it out. I do the research on it. I know it off the top of my head, but I know the details. So I go in and I do it. All right. So this is where it gets weird. It's a good story. You'll love it. Go listen to it on Paranormal Tower podcast. But I have decided that I'm going to unveil this particular artifact to you guys. I know what the artifact is, but I haven't dug really deeply into its origin. I know what it's purported to do. I know what people believe it has attached to it. But as far as its origination story, I don't really know that much. So 2 days ago, after I said I was going to do this, I start digging in and I start reaching out to people who owned it in the past and to groups that investigated in the past. And it turns out that this came from a tavern in the early 1990s. This was found in a tavern in Morristown. And it's a famously haunted tavern. It's no longer in existence. And it was a place called Jimmy's Haunt. Jimmy's Haunt was torn down in 2009. Before Jimmy's Haunt was Jimmy's Haunt, it was a place called Argyle's. Before it was a place called Argyle's, it was a place called Phoebe's. Before it was Phoebe's, it was a farmhouse owned by the Sayers. This place was their home. This knife, which is what I'm going to show you, was found in Phoebe's room. This is not the knife that Phoebe was killed with. It's not possible. I can tell by the age of the knife. The knife is very, very old. However, it has been used in other crimes, and including at least one other murder. So I'm getting chills thinking about it, because this knife was in my possession, but I didn't know what it was. And then I decided to tell the story of Phoebe, and I decided to tell the story of that house while this knife was in my house. That's crazy, guys. I mean, I don't know if you find that as shocking as I do, but I really don't know how to explain it. So I am going to take you guys over to the table. Bear with me, if you will. I have some cameras set up for the investigation we're going to do a little bit later. And I'm going to take this thing out. All right. There's actually 2 artifacts here that have never been put out before. This is Mateo, and we will talk about Mateo maybe tonight if we have any activity around it. And guys, if you can see this, I'm going to take this up to you. This is our little artifact box. It's called the artifact isolation. I try to take artifacts and put them into some place where they can be safe, but also isolated from other artifacts. And let me see. This has nothing to do with quarantine, but I want to keep the artifact safe if I can. Can you guys see that fairly clearly? Hey, Siobhan, say something. She's going to say something again. All right. All right, you guys. This is the knife. Ooh. That was found in Phoebe's bedroom. It was made in Germany. It's definitely a hunting knife. It's not that sharp on the edges, but the point still is. It's fixed. It definitely looks like it could do some damage. It was made by a company. It looks like it probably was made, and I'll have to search this, maybe the late 19th century to early 20th century by a company called Iroka. So it's definitely pre-war, but how much earlier than that, I don't know. All right. So we're going to try and do an EVP session with that. And what I wanted to do with this one, let me take this off. So Siobhan has said that that's very well preserved. It really is. And I think one of the reasons why is I think people, first of all, I think it was essentially hidden for a long period of time. I think the place was vacant and empty for many years before it was turned into an inn. It wasn't in for about 60 years, but there was about 100 years that there was nothing that it really was. So that's why people would be able to go in and do crazy things. I also, the funny thing about this is that it seems to go to collectors and then leave. In other words, people have it around them, get uncomfortable, don't want it. I heard of this first maybe 17 or 18 years ago. Now, I want to stress this was not the knife that was used to kill Phoebe. But it does raise these weird questions about energy and information and how it how we communicate and how we, where this information goes, because it was kept in the room where she died. And I have to tell you, I cannot explain how that, to me, that's a coincidence beyond coincidence that this came into my house. And the next story that I told to everybody was the story of the room that came from, without knowing that it came from that room. That's really weird, right? So I am going to, all right. So we have about 10 minutes because I wanna get ready for the investigation that's downstairs, but I want to give you guys a little bit more. So first of all, I'm going to ask you, if you have any questions, feel free to ask them now. I'm also going to show you something that I know Siobhan will like. My cool typewriter. The reason why I'm doing that is because that podcast that I talked about, I wrote it on that typewriter, and I got that typewriter from Siobhan and her husband Ian, also known as the Iron Fox. Well, his typewriters are. But I encourage you, if you're interested in getting a typewriter, especially a classic like that, you go to them. No money has exchanged hands for that for that plug to our group of 5. But if you have any questions, go ahead and ask me. And I'm thinking we'll use the portal. Are you guys cool with us using the portal for a few minutes to see if anything comes through? It might be a little weird sounding. And does everybody know what the portal is? All right, here we go. This bad boy is the portal. Now, since we are specifically looking for information pertaining to this knife, I actually think this thing is strong enough that I don't need to put it near it or anything, but it's fine where it is. So let's see what we've got. All right. So for those of you who are familiar with EVP, a portal is a step up from that. It's actually using more amplification and more variant and ambient noise to communicate, or to allow the entities or spirits or energies to communicate. So I'm going to ask if there's anyone here who wishes to communicate with us to please make their presence known. We are specifically trying to communicate with the energy associated with the knife. If you're here with the Can you tell us who you are? What was that? You said a specific name. Can you repeat that? I actually heard a full name. I don't know if you guys did as well. Can you repeat that name? Say it very loudly. Did you say the name Bridge? Do you know where you are? Can you repeat that? Did you say Luigi? So I don't know if you guys heard that, but it sounded like it said it's dead already. We can listen to this later as well because we're recording this. Can you say that louder, please?
Please know that when.
Please what? Did you hurt someone with this knife? Did you hurt somebody? Were you hurt with this knife? Did someone hurt you? Do you want me to hold the knife? I feel like Eddie Murphy now. I want the knife. Was this yours? Or did somebody do something to you with this? What? Repeat that?
This is not an adventure.
Don't do what? Don't do what? I don't know if you guys heard this, and I'm gonna, I'll put this up later so you can listen to it more closely. But when I was holding this and I said, did somebody do something to you with this knife? It very much sounded like it said the word whore. And then something don't do in a different voice before the louder voice came through. Is this yours? Do you want me to put it down?
Control.
What do you mean you're in control? Who's in control? Is this my knife now? You seem like you're getting angry. We're not trying to disrespect you. I just want to know. Can you tell us your name? Give us a clear name. Is your name James? James, we're going to be investigating here all night tonight. So hopefully you'll come through. We have other devices. If you go to one of the cameras that we have, we might be able to see you. We're also going to be doing some recordings. I'm going to put this knife back in the box. I don't know whether or not you were hurt by that knife or you hurt someone with that knife, but we'd like to get to the bottom of it. So even though I'm going to hang this up now, we're not done. You know what I think we're going to try tonight too, guys, is I have an old Victrola downstairs, and I think I'm going to play some ambient news that might... Don't do what? Did you see someone behind me, Siobhan? Well, that's weird because I just felt like there was someone behind me. So I hope you guys are going to tune in for the investigation. I'm going to bring Mateo downstairs too. I'm going to bring this downstairs. We're also going to be going near some of the other artifacts. So those of you who have already come to the museum, you know probably the hot spots of where we're going to be. I'm also going to try something that I don't think anyone has ever tried before. We're going to do an Estes Park or an Estes method, a variation on the Estes method. I'm calling it the Asbury Park method. So what? And what it is we're going to do an EVP session or a ghost box session where somebody off-site is actually asking questions through our cameras, and I'm getting the information. I heard, so Siobhan said she heard someone say, don't do it. Earlier, I heard someone say, don't do it. So in the beginning, and it was very low. And sometimes when you hear the sounds of like what's clearly radio coming in, that doesn't mean that they're not using the radio, at least according to the theories of how this works. But sometimes you have to listen below that. And I heard more than once somebody say, don't do it. I also heard someone, I thought it sounded like Matthew Bridge. And then I thought it sounded like James came through when I said, what is your name? The interesting thing about James and why I kind of jumped on it is because the person that found Phoebe was a guy whose name was James. Okay, so we're going to disconnect for about 20 minutes while I get the camera set up. When we come back, I'll simulcast it on this stream, but also on Facebook. I'm clearly not a pro on this, okay? Hey, Kristen, what's up, girl? Clearly not a pro at this. So the cameras are probably going to be different angles, doing different things. Once I know what I'm doing, I'll invest in whatever kind of technology I need to make this happen correctly. But for now, just bear with me as far as what tonight's going to be like. You guys are awesome. You're the main team. I really appreciate you coming out and supporting us. Siobhan, is anyone else watching? I'm pointing to your name as if you're sitting there, as a word. Is anyone else watching that I should give a shout out to? Is Cormac there? Are the girls there? Koira? Saoirse, like Inertia or Saoirse? And of course, Ian. All right, you guys. So give me a sec. I'm going to set up downstairs. And we're going to do a couple of other things. We also have an SLS that we're going to use tonight. I just am going to try to figure out how I can get that delivered to you. For those of you who don't know what an SLS is, you can feel free to ask me that question, or I will probably tell you whether you like it or not. But if there is a particular artifact that you're curious about, make sure you write about it either here or on Facebook Live so that I can address it. Okay? All right, you guys, see you in a bit.